Olay, 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 olay. I'm back, and this video will be a perfect blend between Quithmith and Conquest. If y'all dislike the conquest of Siberia, then I don't know what to tell you. So this video craft will explain how Russia went from a beta male to a Chad Sigma that imprisons opposition. Alexa, let's start this video. Okay, so at the time, Russia looked like this. Its actual name was the Tsardom of Russia, and it was headed by none other than the Tsar himself, Ivan the Terrible. See, look at that photo. You can tell by his sick fur outfit and globus cruciger that he must be a way holy dude. Now, at the time, Russia was a sort of fringe European power that was already giant, but going to get absolutely massive soon. Their eastern border was bound by the Ural Mountains, which is actually the marking point between Europe and Asia, and they wanted to break loose. So in 1582, Russia embarked on its first actual expansion, which was a team of around 600 Cossacks, give or take, under the leadership of Yermak Timofeyevich, this dude, who invaded the Khanate of Siberia, which was ruled by Kuchum Khan. Glad you got that right. This is where the name Siberia comes from, because apparently this one Khanate is good enough to be used for the entire friggin' thing. The whole thing was a series of back-and-forth raids and battles between Yermak's men and the Tatars, an Asian ethnic group that the Russians at the time saw as barbarians. Hurtful stuff. Eventually, after breaking lines at the Irtysh River, the Russians won and captured the Khanate. Later, they constructed a fort in Tyumen, which today grew into a large city in Russia. The Russians eventually captured Kuchum Khan's family and held them as hostages. Finally, Russia was in Siberia. Now, as Russia grew, they had to hold on to power over the Siberian peoples in their new territory. Russia implemented a tax system over them called Yasak, which made the Siberians fork over furs from various furry animals. This system also led Russian colonists east into Siberia, supplanting the natives more and more as time went on. Subsequently, the Russians began to build winter forts called ostrogs, which were constructed along rivers and their intersecting points, which, by the way, Siberia has a lot of. Like I mentioned, Tyumen already, which is situated along the Tura River. This facilitates trade and makes them easier to reach, and also provides a system of navigation, since back then rivers were basically just roads made of water. Many of these forts would become large cities today. Russia had now definitely broken into Siberia, specifically southern Siberia, which is mostly steppes. The steppe landscape is a grassland which is typically flat with rolling hills or mountains and are usually unforested, meaning no trees or at least very little. They are typically very large and dry, receiving little rainfall and can be warm or cool, usually lots of tall grasses. This landscape absolutely fills southern Russia and Central Asia, but more broadly southern Siberia, so basically like Ukraine to Mongolia. So bear in mind that while watching this video, that steppes are where these guys are at for, like, the majority of it. Northern Siberia, well, we'll get to that in a hot minute. Yermak dies. Sorry. The next ethnic group on Russia's to-do list was the Nenets people, who inhabit northwest Siberia close to the Ural Mountains. They actually spill into Europe as well, but whatever. And were basically just reindeer herders. They got subjugated by 1600 exactly, and the fort village of Surgut was founded in 1594 to pacify and absorb the Khanty tribe. Friendly reminder that as this video goes on, the Russians are sending white Russian settlers to colonize their new land grabs and supplant these conquered tribes. Anyway, now is when the Tsardom of Russia approaches the mighty Ob River, carving Siberia betwixt. The Ostrog of Tomsk was founded in 1604, which would later go on to become a very big city in the modern era. 1 year later, the Yenisei River is reached, and the Ostrog of Krasnoyarsk is founded in 1628. Krasnoyarsk will become a large city in its own right in the modern era. Now that the last remaining Siberian tribal confederations have been disbanded by the onset of the approaching Ruskies, this is where the real fun begins. The Tsar back in Moscow is Michael I, and this man wants to expand. Without any real resistance, starting in the late 1620s, Russia blazes across Siberia, capturing mind-boggling amounts of land. The Russians steamroll across central Siberia, which switches from steppes and plains to densely wooded taiga forests. By the 1630s and 40s, Russia was expanding into Buryatia, a region of southern Siberia inhabited by the Buryat people, close to Mongolia, although they didn't fully reach Lake Baikal yet. We'll get to that in a second. They had yet to expand through all of it, though, considering the taiga forests are actually very large and can slow you down. They also had expanded across the harsh, frigid, and unforgiving Arctic coast in the north, home to some of the most extreme and cold conditions on Earth. In fact, they went so far north that they reached the Taimyr Peninsula around 1635, but couldn't explore the entire thing due to harsh conditions, leaving a patch of unclaimed and wild land far north into Siberia that wouldn't be fully conquered and explored until 1716. In 1639, Russian explorers had expanded so far into Siberia that they crossed all of northern Asia, did a 360, and reached the opposite ocean, the Pacific, specifically the Sea of Okhotsk. They founded the small settlement of Okhotsk along the coast, remaining incredibly isolated. In 1643, the Russians finally reached Lake Baikal, a large and tall lake in northern Asia. Lake Baikal became an important spot for founding settlements, and even came complete with its own native populations of fish and seals. It's actually the 7th largest lake on the entire planet. By the late 1640s, the Russians had also begun to explore the Amur River in the Far East, becoming one of Siberia's main lifeblood rivers. It also became the defined border between Russia and the Qing dynasty, which was basically China. By the early 1650s, Russia had secured the majority of Siberia, an area millions of miles in area under their control. With this, however, came the presence of millions of different people and tribes and cultures. Russia began to secure their European influence over them by demanding Yasak fur tax. Yes, that's coming back, remember it. But this would be met with hostility often, for some reason. In return, the Cossacks came bounding over to slaughter and massacre many different tribes and whatnot, spreading disease and sicknesses to wipe out many different tribes. These tribes included the Koryaks, the Chukchi, Yakuts, Dowers, and more. When they refused to pay up, they were slaughtered, tortured, raped, and enslaved, sometimes literally in that order. Now that many of the Yakuts were displaced or killed, the city of Yakutsk was founded along the Lena River in 1643, but continued to be settled until the 1650s. It should also be no surprise that they got so far north that they breached the Arctic Circle and could see the Aurora Borealis. In places such as north-central Siberia and the Arctic coast, staves of ice and flat clearings of snowy land were common. By the time the 1700s rolled around, the Tsardom of Russia transitioned into the Russian Empire with Peter the Great in charge. The Russians still wished to continue northeast into the barren and bleak lands of the Chukchi Peninsula, which they still had yet to press into and fully explore. The Chukchi Peninsula is so far removed from the rest of Asia, so isolated from Russia, that it's one of the most forlorn parts of the world. While there, they began to slowly make haste through it, crushing the Edelmen and Koryaks until they finally got land along the Chukchi Sea, Bering Sea, and Arctic Ocean. These are some of the farthest north bodies of water in the world, just for reference. These tribes fell quickly since they used primitive weapons and lived in huts compared to the Russians, who were well equipped with black powder, flintlocks, horses, and boats. The Chukchi were more fierce, however, and Empress Elizabeth wanted them to be totally annihilated. They actually put up a great fight and decapitated the Russian commander who tried to kill them. Hey, look, it's 1716, and the rest of the Taimyr Peninsula finally got captured from before. Get that squared away. In 1724, an expedition was commanded by the Tsar to go explore the Kamchatka Peninsula, a mysterious peninsula in the far, far northeast of Siberia. Kamchatka was to be found very mountainous and rugged, and full of volcanoes and pine forests. They also busted out Danish explorer Vitus Bering to check things out. The Russians decided they had had enough and began to build Orthodox churches everywhere in Siberia in an effort to convert the natives. However, this didn't really work and just ended up with the slaughtering of more tribes when they didn't convert. Russian colonists also began mass slaughtering animals for their furs as well, seeing that European powers were getting rich off massacring animals like beavers and whatnot for their furs, so the Russians started up a fur trading business in Siberia, so they did that as well, by just, offing all the different burly animals they've found in Siberia, like beavers and bears and reindeer and stuff like that. Ungulates. In 1778, the Russian Empire finally explored the rest of the Chukotka Peninsula, which is some of the remotest and most bleak and cold land on Earth. Useful, eh? In 1786, the Russian Empire claimed the Kuril Islands, a rugged and isolated island chain stretching between Kamchatka and Japan. Scoop up the Ainu tribe, I'm sure that won't go badly. Also, Russia figured, hey, this is all useless land, we're outstretched from our capital by thousands of miles, let's keep going! And so, in 1796, Russia crossed the Bering Strait into Alaska. They literally hopped over into an entirely new continent, North America, in the name of colonization, and they say the British were the master colonists. Gee whiz. I'm not getting into Alaska because it's not Siberia, but I thought you should know, because I love you. Aww. In 1828, the Russian Empire discovered a group of islands in the Arctic Ocean off the northeastern coast of Siberia, which became the New Siberian Islands. They aren't very useful, I just thought I'd tell ya. In 1853, the Russian Empire annexes the northern half of the island of Sakhalin, with the southern part being owned by Imperial Japan. And yes, all of these places I've rattled off to you over the past few minutes are absolutely isolated and have barely anyone on them. Whoa, hey, what's this? It's the Treaty of Igrsan between the Russian Empire and the Qing Dynasty of China. This treaty says that the Russian Empire gets this entire region annexed. What a sick deal. It added the Russian Far East. Epic win. This is part of Manchuria, by the way, with the other part being in China. I feel like everyone's heard of Manchuria, but have no idea where it's at. This region is fairly mountainous and covered in a temperate rainforest called the Primorsky Rainforest, which gave way to the name of its modern division, Primorsky Krai. Oh my god! In this new territory, Russian settlers quickly flooded in, and the port city of Nikolaevsk on Amur was founded in 1856. Meanwhile, Vladivostok was founded in 1860 on a small peninsula by the Sea of Japan. With the sudden addition of this new territory, a lot of Asian influence was injected into Russia's Inus. Pretty cool! In 1875, Russia got the rest of the island of Sakhalin from Japan, and oh boy, here comes the Soviet Union! That's right, baby, this colonization is going into the Soviet era. They discovered the frozen hellhole of an archipelago that was Severnaya Zemlya in 1815, the last land on Earth to be discovered by humans. A year later, they took Wrangel Island from Canada, surprisingly. Story about that day. Speaking of which, I've been putting off that fourth video forever. Also, in 1944, they annexed the communist Tanu-Tuva Republic near the border of China. Technically Siberia. Whoa, hey, Fabergé eggs. Very Russian. Anyways, here's a map of each city in Siberia. Also, I threw in some geographic features just to keep your mind active. Pretty cool infographic, right? Hey, wouldn't it be cool if different European countries colonized Siberia in the same way that they carved up North America? Like they'd sail around Russia and maybe France sets up some ports somewhere, Britain sets up some river forts, etc. Cool idea. Anyways, enjoy looking at this map. I'm sure you can pause it. Alright, end of video time. I hope you liked this video. I absolutely loved researching this one, and I hope you love watching it even more than I loved making it. Anyways, I will see you guys next year in the great year of 2022, and if this year is anything to go off of, I'm sure 2022 will be a magnificent year. Nah, I'm just screwing with you. I'm sure it'll suck. Ba 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 ba.